Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Sunday, August 4th. Today is day 303. A just war in Gaza. There has been a lot of conversation about whether or not Israel has a right to defend itself and whether or not its war against Hamas is a just war. Today is August 4th. It's a Sunday. Normally on Sundays, I try to spend some time reflecting. Today, I've been praying a lot, reflecting a lot, particularly about the lives of children that have been lost over the 9, now going on 10 months, almost, these last 303 days since October 7th. I should warn you, my reflection today, it was difficult. For me, it might be difficult for you to hear, so I wanted to just let you know some of the things I'm sharing are heart-wrenching. My prayer has been that God would be with those that are currently injured and suffering, those who have lost loved ones. Now, the death tolls in Gaza are 40,000 plus. Some say it could be double that. Those injured are in the tens of thousands. In Israel, the death toll on October 7th, 1,200 plus, hundreds more with soldiers killed who've been a part of fighting over the last several months. People in Palestine, people in Gaza, all over the world are begging for a negotiated settlement, that hostages could be returned home, that the hundreds of Palestinian prisoners who are being held without any type of due process could be sent back to their families, that they might be released, that this war could be brought to an end, that the genocide would end, that the ethnic cleansing would end. And I would implore you, if you have not seen the images of what things look like in Gaza, don't turn your eyes away. If you have not given witness, if you have not seen the images coming out of Gaza, the images might haunt you. They haunt every Palestinian. They also haunt every Israeli family or parent who has a loved one that may or may not be alive still in Gaza. The Israeli bombs that are being dropped on Gaza are just as fearful for Israeli families who have loved ones there as they are for Palestinians as well. And those images should haunt every single American because many of the bombs that are being dropped are made right here in the United States. And not only that, the weapons are being used to shoot at schools and places where people are taking shelter. They're taking refuge. People who've been displaced not once, but now multiple times over the last 9+ months. And one of the excuses often that's being used is that the bombing is happening at locations where militants are hiding. And so it's the militants' fault that these schools are being bombed. And that's just not good enough. That's just not good enough. And according to international law, you can't justify the killing of a militant. You can't justify the killing of civilians because you also were able to successfully, kill a terrorist. In our country, the vast majority of political leaders are either turning a blind eye or they're saying that these atrocities are justified, that the death tolls are warranted, or that the death tolls are someone else's fault. Blame it on Hamas or say it's a just war. And neither is good enough. My colleague, who is currently our Ambassador Warren Clark Fellow at Churches for Middle East Peace, Scott Gustafson, and I just wrote an op-ed that was published in the last few days in Newsweek. It was called "Christians Should Pursue a Just Peace in Gaza." And here are some of the thoughts that we shared in that piece. I would encourage you to read it. You can find it on Newsweek. Christians should pursue a just peace in Gaza. I'm just going to read you a little excerpt from it. Many Christians believe Israel's war against Hamas is a just war, and that the state of Israel must exercise a right to self-defense in response to the atrocious attacks of October 7th. Leaders encourage this thinking and support a binary choice of us or them, good versus evil, barbarians and monsters against the civilized and free. But such exercises in justifying violence entertain the wrong questions at the wrong time. The suffering of innocent civilians is compounded by inadequate moral reflection. The violence and hostage-taking perpetuated against Israelis and internationals, the staggering Palestinian death toll in Gaza, and the detention of many in Israeli prisons without rights or trial are beyond deeply troubling. A zero-sum hostility is tightening its grip on the world where each side's victory demands the other's total demise. All sides of the conflict have hardened their position, dehumanized their enemy, and propagated a contagious radicalization spreading across the globe. Christians have frequently turned to just war theory and pacifism to posit moral criteria in response to the conflict. But they must remember that Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." The right questions at this critical time must be deeper ones that seek righteousness and justice to birth and sustain peace. We need a different paradigm befitting Christians called to be agents of reconciliation. A zero-sum mentality allows one to justify the bombing of innocent Palestinian children in Gaza by blaming the atrocities on the horrors that Hamas committed. That's me speaking now. But friends, to put it simply, two wrongs don't make a right. One can't be let off the hook by killing innocents because someone else contributed to the scenario that got you there in the first place. That resulted, if innocent children are killed, it doesn't justify the fact that militants may be doing what Israel says they are, or the fact that Hamas is wrong and the Israeli military are wrong. Innocent children should not be killed, period. They're the victims here, caught in the middle, and they're being brutally slaughtered. Just as the injustices of the occupation and decades of human rights abuses against Palestinians don't justify the atrocities of October 7th, the realities of whatever Hamas is doing does not justify the death of tens of thousands of innocent civilians, period. It just doesn't. That's poor moral thinking. Each and every day, over the past several days and over the past several weeks, but almost every day, not every day, almost every day, schools in Gaza that are being used to house displaced people, including children, are being bombed, justified by the Israeli military with the rationalization that it's Hamas's fault because militants are storing weapons there or militants are hiding there. Not good enough. That's an inadequate moral argument, and it's inadequate according to international humanitarian law. Kenneth Roth, a professor at the Princeton School for Public and International Affairs and the former executive director of Human Rights Watch, told Al Jazeera, Israeli attacks on Gaza schools amount to war crimes. Israel is facing a real credibility problem as it keeps hitting schools with the excuse that Hamas fighters are being killed. Just a few days ago, when Israel killed 2 Al Jazeera journalists, it said they were supposedly Hamas operatives, while there's no proof whatsoever of that. Most people remember when Israel first invaded Al-Shifa Hospital because there were supposedly Hamas command centers there, but the proof they showed was pathetic. They showed a couple of rifles, one tunnel that turned out was built by Israel, but Roth said that even if the Israeli claims were true, one of the requirements according to international humanitarian law is that the attacker has a duty not to proceed if the harm to civilians will be disproportionate, even if the target is military. If 80% of the victims are children, then it was not a proportionate attack. So it does not matter if a couple of Hamas fighters were there or whatever the Israeli military claims. When you kill that many civilians, the result is disproportionate, and that's a war crime. So my prayers today are for all of the children that have suffered and are suffering and have been killed in Gaza over the past days, the past week, the past month, and the past months, particularly those sheltering in schools. The children killed at the Hamama school in the Sheikh Radwan neighborhood in Gaza City in North Gaza. The children injured and killed at the Al Huda schools in the Sheikh Radwan neighborhood in Gaza City. That's just in the past day. The children injured and killed at the UN-run Al-Razi school in central Nusrat refugee camp that was bombed in mid-July. The children injured and killed at the UNRWA-run schools throughout Gaza, but those in the Nusrat refugee camp on July 7th. There were a couple of weeks in July where day after day, in 10 days, there were 6 schools that were bombed. Today, my prayer is for the more than 15,000 children who have died in Gaza over the last 303 days. In the West Bank, 144 Palestinian children have been killed since October 7th. Today, we also remember the children that were killed on that day, October 7th, the 2 infants, Milo Cohen, a baby just under 1 year. He was killed with his father and grandmother. A Bedouin woman was giving birth that day, and while she was on the way to the hospital, she was shot in the abdomen. Her child was delivered and was not able to survive. A second child died. 36 young people between the ages of 10 and 19 were killed on October 7th. We remember the 12 other children who were under the age of 10 that were killed at the hands of Hamas or other militants on October 7th. We remember the beautiful life of Hind Rahab, I've told you her story numerous times. She was killed in Gaza. The world watched and hoped and longed for good news after we heard her voice desperately pleading for health workers to come and save her when she was in a car that was riddled with bullets and she was surrounded by her family who had been killed. And then after days and days of waiting, her body was also found and she had lost her life. If you missed her story, I told it in detail. The Washington Post did an investigation, and my April 18th update tells her story of Hind, 6 years old, killed in Gaza. We remember the life of each of the 15,000 plus children killed in Gaza, each and every child whose life was lost on October 7th. God welcomed the little children to himself. There is nothing about any war that justifies taking the life of a child and the life of the innocent. Might we not be so disillusioned to say that this is a just war? The Gospel of Matthew, chapter 19, the people brought the little children to Jesus and they placed him there and he laid his hands on them and he prayed for them, and the disciples rebuked the people, and Jesus responded and said, "Let the little children come to me. Do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." If the kingdom of heaven belongs to children, it means that young people, all children, regardless of where they were born or where they are from, must be honored and protected. They should not be bombed. They should not be killed, especially when they are seeking shelter in a school, an institution that is supposed to be protected by international law and the international community. God have mercy. Christ have mercy. Might we not give up in our efforts of pursuing peace. In the name of Christ, amen.